There we go. Welcome, everyone, to this February 5th, 2025 meeting of the Board of Supervisors of Lower Makefield Township. Please join me in stating the Pledge of Allegiance. Start with a roll call. Supervisor Blundy?
Here.
Supervisor Ross?
Here.
Supervisor Lewis?
Present.
Supervisor McCartney?
Present.
All right, all supervisors are here. Before we do our community announcements tonight, I just have a statement, and we're going to have a moment of silence. On behalf of the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors, it is with heavy hearts that we share the passing of Supervisor Anna Payne of Middletown Township. Supervisor Payne courageously battled cystic fibrosis most of her life and stage 4 colon cancer for the past 4 years, demonstrating an incredible spirit, resilience, and positive attitude. Her passion for Middletown Township and her advocacy for the community will not be forgotten. Her kindness, dedication, and spirit will forever be an inspiration to us all. Please keep her family, friends, and colleagues in your thoughts during this difficult time. Thank you. Item 4, community announcements. Reminder, during this portion of the agenda, residents and youth organizations may call in to make a special announcement or contact the township at admin@lmt.org to request a special announcement to be added to the agenda. The Lower Makefield Township Environmental Advisory Council is sponsoring a free Valentine's Day lecture, Naughty by Nature, on Saturday, February 15th, 2025, from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the Township Building. Doors will open at 9:30 a.m. for anyone interested in a book signing or a Q&A session. Supervisor Lewis, do you know any of the details of Naughty by Nature? Is that?
No.
Be surprised? Okay.
Nope.
The Yardley Farmers Market will be at the Community Center, 1550 Oxford Valley Road, the first and third Saturdays or every month until April 2025 from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Do any supervisors have any additional announcements this evening? All right. Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 5, public comment on non-agenda items. So this, if you have comment on any items that do not appear on the agenda, feel free to come up to the podium here, state your name, whether or not you're a township resident, and we try to limit comments to 3 minutes, but we can give you more time if needed. Does anyone have public comment tonight? All right, seeing none. Doesn't appear that we have any public comment online either. So we will move on to item number 6, consent agenda items. Any supervisors have any items on the consent agenda that they'd like to remove or table, perhaps?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to remove items E and F from the consent agenda.
Okay. Everyone?
You need a second?
I don't think we do.
No.
Okay, so we're just going to remove them. And then do we need a second motion to table? You would need a motion to table. Okay. Would you like to make that?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to table items E and F in the consent agenda.
I'll second.
All right. Motion to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Those 2 items are tabled. That being said, any other items on the consent agenda that anyone from the board would like to?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the consent agenda item as amended by Supervisor McCartney.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. We have approved the consent agenda as discussed. All right. Item number 7, community development. So tonight we have a conditional use hearing regarding a potential kennel use at 748 Stony Hill Road for MRG Stony Hill LP, aka Canine Resort. I'll hand it over to our solicitor to open things up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a conditional use hearing. The applicant's name is MRG Stony Hill LP. The applicant and the owner are the same, MRG Stony Hill LP. The property is 748 Stony Hill Road, tax map parcel number 20-016-036-001. The relief sought is a conditional use approval pursuant to section 200-36B, parens 1, parens small d of the Historic Commercial District to allow a kennel use in the historic commercial district. Looks like everybody's settled, so we can, before we begin, I am going to provide the applicant with I'm going to give 2 copies of the list of exhibits that each of the supervisors have before them. So if you just pardon me for 1 second. Thank you. So we're here this evening on the application of MRG Stony Hill LP for a conditional use approval. Notice of the hearing has been properly advertised and posted by the township, as you will note in the exhibit packets. The public notice reads as follows. Notice is hereby given that Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 at 7:30 p.m. in the Lower Makefield Township Municipal Building at 1100 Edgewood Road, Yardley, Pennsylvania, 19067, to hear the application of MRG Stony Hill LP, 748 Stony Hill Road, Yardley, Pennsylvania, 19067, tax map parcel 20-016-036-001. The applicant is requesting conditional use approval pursuant to zoning ordinance section 200-36B to permit a kennel use in the historic commercial zoning district. Any interested person desiring to attend the hearing will be given the opportunity to be heard. Signed by the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors, dated January 15th, 2025. The applicant proposes to develop a property located in the historic commercial zoning district on 4.152 acres of the 7.057 acre property to allow up to 125 dogs and allow a rear yard exercise area. Conditional use approval is required for such activity pursuant to the Lower Makefield Township Code of Ordinances, section 200-36B. A copy of the full text of the application is on file at the Lower Makefield Township Building, 1100 Edgewood Road, Yardley, PA, 19067, where copies may be examined without charge or obtained for a charge not exceeding the cost thereof. The public hearing will provide an opportunity for interested township residents to comment upon and/or make recommendations with respect to the application. At the public meeting, at its conclusion, the Board of Supervisors may consider approval of the application, or they may take their allowance of 45 days to make such decision. Any person with a disability who wishes to attend and requires an auxiliary aid, service, or other assistance to observe or participate in the proceedings should contact the township at 267-274-1100 as early as possible prior to the meeting. The township will engage in an effort to provide reasonable accommodation. By way of background, the zoning ordinance provides that certain identified principal uses of land are allowed in each district, known as permitted either by right, as conditional use, and as special exceptions. Each of these are types of permitted uses. The zoning officer issues zoning permits, which in application demonstrates a use permitted by right. Special exceptions and conditional uses are 2 permitted uses that are allowed when an applicant can demonstrate that they meet certain objective criteria set forth in the zoning ordinance. Conditional use applications are heard by the governing body, namely the Board of Supervisors, and special exceptions applications are determined by the Zoning Hearing Board. The term conditional use and special exceptions are misnomers. The fact that a certain use is permitted as a special exception or conditional use evidences a legislative determination that such would not have an adverse impact on the public interest in normal circumstances. Because conditional uses are not permitted by right, a landowner must apply to the governing body for conditional use approval, which can only be granted or denied after public hearing. A conditional use involves the use of the land as opposed to the particular design details of the development. In the conditional use hearing, the applicant bears the burden of establishing that the proposed conditional use satisfies the criteria in the zoning ordinance. For example, the board is the in-fact finder with the responsibility for credibility determinations and the weight to assign the evidence. If the board is persuaded that the application complies with the zoning ordinance, a presumption arises that the proposed use is, quote, consistent with the general welfare of the community, unquote. In this instance, the Lower Makefield Township ordinances relevant to discussion on zoning, or in this matter, are Section 200-36B, Parens 1, Parens D, permitted uses in the historic commercial district. The following regulation shall apply. A building or structure may be erected or used, and a lot may be used or occupied for any of the following uses and no other. All uses permitted by right or by special exception are subject to the specific regulations in Article 15 of the ordinance for individual uses, in addition to the requirements contained in this and other sections. Now, I won't bore you and read you the entirety of that section of the ordinance. However, it does state that conditional uses are required for, and it lists a number of items, which this use proposed is not a named item. So it goes under the catch-all section of uses other than those set forth below may be permitted in the HC district, and it falls under the catch-all of such use conforms with all of the other applicable requirements of the historical commercial district and of this chapter in general. In addition, another relevant provision of the ordinance is Section 200-68-A, Parens 20, which is a use regulation for the definition of a kennel. A definition of a kennel is the keeping of more than 3 dogs that are more than 6 months old for breeding, training, sale, or boarding for a fee or as pets, provided that the following conditions are met. Minimum net lot area shall be 5 acres. No animal shelter or runaway shall be located closer than 150 feet from a property boundary. The total number of dogs on the property shall not exceed 5 dogs per acre, excluding dogs under 6 months of age. In addition, the most important, or one of the more important provisions of the code that are relevant to the hearing this evening are the conditional use itself, the general requirements and the applicable requirements of a conditional use. So the Board of Supervisors shall have the power to approve or disapprove conditional uses when this chapter specifically requires the obtaining of such approval in accordance with the following provisions. And again, I won't bore you with all the details and all the provisions, but the Board of Supervisors shall grant a conditional use only if it finds adequate evidence that the proposed development submitted will meet all of the following general requirements, that it, number 1, is in accord with the Lower Makefield Township Comprehensive Plan. Number 2, an improvement shall not be a detriment to the properties in the immediate vicinity. Number 3, the proposal is suitable for the property in question and designed to be constructed, operated, and maintained so as to be in harmony with and appropriate in appearance with the existing intended character of the general vicinity. Number 4, in conformance with all applicable requirements of this chapter, and all township ordinances. And number 5, suitable in terms of effects on the highway traffic. And I summarized all of the above. In general, the Board of Supervisors shall request an advisory opinion from the Township Planning Commission on any application of conditional use. I can tell you that has been fulfilled and completed. This applicant has been before your Planning Commission, and a recommendation has been rendered by them. At this time, we'll begin the hearing in earnest. I'd like to ask anybody in the audience if they would like to obtain, or anybody online, if they would request party status. And if anybody needs a explanation or definition of what party status is, please let me know. Seeing none and seeing nobody online, we will presume that no one is requiring party status. To enter into the record, we have board exhibits. We've prepared a number of board exhibits, which the supervisors have in front of them. I've handed to the applicant and their attorney. Specifically, we have labeled as T1, the summary of the Planning Commission meeting on October 30th, 2024, as A1, conditional use application and the applicable township ordinance provisions, T2, Planning Commission minutes from October 30th of 2024, A2, concept plan C prepared by Land Corps, last revised January 6, 2025, A3, noise study by Ostergaard Acoustical Associates, B4, proof of publication, B2, notice of posting, B3, notice to the neighbors, A4, applicant's October 30th, 2024 presentation to the Planning Commission. Are there any objections to the board's exhibits? None. Thank you. If anyone is presenting evidence tonight that should be sworn in, I would suggest we just swear in everybody at the same time, so we're not interrupting your testimony. And
We'll also have two people on Zoom.
okay, I'm guessing our court reporter can do the swearing in. So, are they available by Zoom? And if not, we'll just swear them in when they.
I don't,
When they're
they were
testifying.
supposed to be on Zoom.
Zoom. They're on Zoom. They're in the room right now.
Okay. You know, it probably makes sense just to swear them in when they come up, but the people that are here.
Whatever's
right
easiest,
now,
yeah.
both people sitting at the table with you, so why don't we swear both of them in this evening?
Okay.
Right now, not this evening, right now.
Yes.
I don't know if your microphones are on, but you have to get really close to them, and even when you say yes, you've got to, so that it can be picked up by the people watching at home.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
just so if we can't hear you for some reason, I'll usually get a blinking light in the back telling me that we can't hear you, and I may ask you to repeat yourself. That's why I'll be asking.
I'd like to apologize. I tried to get everything perfect for tonight, and on the way out my door, my hearing aids went blowy, and I'm struggling to make sure I hear everything. So I apologize if I miss a question. If I look at you, I can usually figure out what you're saying, but I'm sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. I want to introduce myself as Ron Rusk. I'm the partner of one of the partners in MRG Stony Hill, and I was the one that was selected tonight to make the presentation. I would like to point out that we have John Fenningham here, who's our very capable zoning lawyer, but my partners made it very clear that they thought this presentation should be more business approach. This is not a legal argument. We're not here to discuss the law, even though we know the law's involved. We think our project stands on its own as having merit, and we'd like to be looked at it from that point. I would suggest that if something of a legal nature is said or said by me, and either the solicitor or my attorney needs to correct that, I apologize, but I'll try to do my best and keep our proposal and all the witnesses' proposal, again, to facts and to the business part of what we're trying to propose here. It's taken us quite a while to get here. We've been in front of the Planning Commission a few times. We've met with staff a lot of times. We had a couple kind of false starts with the zoning hearing board, and we're glad we finally are in a position where we can present our case to the people that are really the most important people, the people making the decision to the benefit of the residents of Lower Makefield. We believe our project, but first of all, we've owned KinderCare, the three partners, which is myself, Jim McCaffrey, and Steve Goldstein, have owned the KinderCare for quite a few years. Over those years that we've owned it, we've always planned on developing what we consider the surplus land, or the 4.5 acres that are adjacent to the KinderCare. But in all that time that we've owned it, we've never seen a proposal or been offered anything that we thought was, number one, complementary to the kinder care, and number two, offered a benefit to the township. And then just as important to us was, it's a heavily wooded site. We didn't want to have to disrupt more of the trees than necessary. So as a fact, when we had the opportunity and the Canine Hotel Resorts came to us and kind of described their use, we thought it was something that was needed in the township. You'll hear testimony tonight as to why we think this site is a perfect site and why we think it's something that, again, what the township needs. Any of you who are dog owners or have friends or family that are dog owners know that it's darn near impossible anymore to find a decent place to board your dog. In fact, my family just went away and they have to hire somebody to sit at the house to take care of their dog because there's really not a suitable place for the dogs to be taken care of. Tonight, we're going to hear from a number of people. The first person we'll be hearing from is our canine operator. She's a local person. She owns a canine already in Horsham Township, is operating successfully, and she lives very local to, she lives just across the line in Upper Makefield. So she's very local and understands everything about Lower Makefield, which we thought was important. She's going to address the important things, which is, how the operation operates. You're going to see a video to really give you an understanding. Some of you may have already seen the video. And she's certainly going to address the number of dogs, kind of the noise that is created by the dogs, which is always a concern, and then how we deal with dog waste, which again, I think are the three most important things. So she'll be dealing with that. We also have someone here from Canine Corporate. What they're going to explain is how these canines are operated all across the United States, how they fit in with many residential areas. They're in shopping centers, they're in residential areas, and they have nothing to do with the kennel that we all grew up with. And we all know what the kennel is in here in Yardley. When I ever hear about a kennel, what I think of is a barn with farm animals and a bunch of dogs running around. When you see the video and understand what canine is about, it's a totally different operation, totally not a kennel, even though that's the only place we fit in the definition in your ordinance. Our civil engineer will be here tonight, and he'll discuss how we plan on developing the site to protect the environment, to make sure that the noise mitigation is absolutely as great as it can be. And we'll touch on things about how we'd like to minimize the use of the site to protect the wooded area and the character of the entire neighborhood. Then you're going to hear from our sound engineer, which we think is kind of a very critical part of this whole application. Our sound engineer has done studies here in Lower Makefield. They studied it and you have a copy of the study. They monitored the sound for a number of days and studied the ambient noise in the background. Our expert has experience with both canine and other types of operations all over the United States, and they understand the ambient noise of the neighborhood and the ambient noise that a barking dog would make when it's protected or set up in a canine type of operation. The results that he will testify to is that basically the ambient noise will be louder than the barking dogs to any neighbor that would be in the area, and how it's protected. And his study will show that, and he'll testify to that. He'll also testify to the fact as to how the canine operation works, and the fact that whether there's 20 dogs there or a couple hundred dogs there, it's not going to affect the noise, because the way the operation works, and he'll go into that in detail as well as Christine will, there's never going to be more than X amount of dogs outside, no matter what. That's a controlled situation, and they have a lot of rules and regulations how they control the dogs to make sure that nothing ever gets out of control. I guess as I kind of wrap up, and before I turn it over to the experts, I think it's important, if I get the microphone here. I think it's important to discuss the surrounding area and what is known as the historic commercial district, what exists there, and why we think this site works perfect for us, and why we think it's an asset to Lower Makefield. First of all, on this particular aerial here, this is the kinder care. This is where we're proposing the canine building right here. So you can see on our site, we're 300 or 400 feet from the kinder care operation. We're set here, we're actually set right along the old road that was developed for the greenhouses that were developed in the rear. And much of our development is centered around being able to use the cleared area that was cleared by the township for the greenhouses, and trying to minimize the amount of trees that we have to cut down. The building is set up on the road per your zoning ordinance. Now here's what we think is one of the more important things. This whole area here is the historic commercial district. So in that district, we have the continuing care. Now that's not in the historic district. Somehow it stayed in R2, but it's right across the street from us. Here is the Penn Community Bank, the children's gym, the cigar shop, the luncheonette, the veterinary, Di Lorenzo's Pizza, the offices. And then we go over to the other side of the street. We have a couple contractors' yards, all of this in the historic district. Then we have the Fieldstone townhouses, all in the historic district. We have a office building, Cam Trulio's office building down here, all in the historic district. And then there's an approved shopping center right on the road here with apartments over it. All of these uses arguably are approved or part of the historic commercial district. You can see it varies quite a bit. We felt that given that we are in a wooded area, backed up to all this open space that'll never be developed, completely surrounded by it, and basically surrounded by other commercial activities, that this would be a perfect use. One of the only places in the township where we think it could work today. I'd like to take a second and point out a couple things. If we take a look at what the permitted uses are in historic commercial, it's permitted to have a blacksmith, a woodworking shop, a tin working shop, an inn/motel, which would be a second story above stores, hypothetically, and quite frankly, a logging operation are all permitted uses. I think it's important because you can see they're very varied in nature. They're sort of service-oriented, or even to some extent you could say even industrial when you're talking about tin working or woodworking. And then if we look at what is prohibited drive-throughs, convenience stores like a Wawa 7-Eleven, gas stations, obviously, firehouse or large retail stores. Even though we're not permitted, we're certainly not prohibited. And any of the types of uses that are prohibited have nothing to do or kind of fit in with anything that we're trying to do here. So we feel that we kind of fit between the cracks, so to speak. And if we move on to talk about what really the thrust of our problem is that we're being called a kennel. And you're going to hear tonight throughout our presentation all the differences between why we should not be called a kennel, but that's what we are. We're here tonight to ask you, the supervisors, to kind of take a look at this from a practical standpoint and see if you agree with us that it's a need, it's a good spot in the township, and it provides a service that doggy daycare is a very low-intense service, and it's a needed service. I guess one of the things I'll close with before I turn it over to the other experts is when we start to talk about a kennel. I kind of compare it that if I look at a Ritz-Carlton and a Motel 6, they're both a place where you spend a night, but nobody would ever confuse the two. When you look at a canine and you look at a kennel, you're not going to confuse the two. You would prefer not to send your dog to a kennel. You would prefer to send your dog to a doggy daycare like canine, where, quite frankly, it's fairly luxurious, which you will see as we move on tonight. Christine Miller will be taking over, but before she takes over, we're going to play a video to kind of give you an exposure as to what Canine Resorts is all about. Thank you. Oh, R-U-S-K? Sorry.
It takes time to decide which boarding or daycare facility is best for your pet. Here's what makes Canine Resorts Luxury Pet Hotel second to none. Your dog is safe in the hands of professionally trained and certified dog lovers. Every team member goes through an extensive training program called Canine Resorts University. Once they graduate, they are well versed in how to take the best care of your dog. The canine experience is designed to keep your dog happy. Some other doggy hotels might not have spacious outdoor and indoor areas. We've made it a standard at every Canine Resorts location, so your dog has plenty of room to run around, play, and exercise. We ensure your dog's health in a number of ways. The Canine Clean System is unique to Canine Resorts and includes top-of-the-line HVAC systems, UV air purification, hospital-grade disinfectants, and antimicrobial flooring at every location. All of this state-of-the-art technology provides your dog with a clean, safe, and comfortable environment. There's plenty more to discover. Schedule a tour at one of our locations and discover why loving pet parents turn to Canine Resorts and why the International Pet Boarding and Services Association rated us #1 in the nation. Canine Resorts, 5-star experience, love and fun included.
Good evening. As Ron said, my name's Christine Miller, and I own the Horsham Canine Resorts, and I would be the franchise owner of this location as well. I've owned the Horsham location for 3.5 years now, and I live in Upper Makefield, so I would be quite close to this one. Just background of Canine Resorts. It was founded, we're hitting our 20-year anniversary this year, founded by Steve and Jason Parker, two brothers who started a dog walking business after school, and it grew from there. So they have over 20 years of experience. They first opened a Canine Resorts in 2005, and we were actually customers of that original resort, and we were so impressed with how it was run that we decided to venture into this world ourselves. Currently, there are 41 open resorts and 170 territories sold in 27 states. Our real purpose is to provide a home away from home, and we want the dogs to be happy there. Our focus is on the health and happiness of the dogs and making sure that our customers are comfortable leaving their dogs in our care, because we know for any of you that might have dogs, that for most people, their dogs are like their children. And I can't tell you how many times I hear people say, I feel like I'm dropping my child off at school or summer camp. We offer both boarding and daycare. First, I'll talk about the boarding. We consider it luxury boarding. We do everything we can to make it enjoyable, not stressful. We have 3 different levels of accommodations. All of the rooms have Kuranda luxury dog beds. The pricing is all inclusive, so it includes a prescription Blue Buffalo dog food, It also includes either group play in our daycares or personal playtime where the dog would be taken out about 6 times per day by one of our staff members to a private yard to play. So we will take dogs for private play that don't do well with other dogs or whose owner for some reason does not want them interacting with other dogs. All dogs that come into the building, however, must be 100% people-friendly, sorry. The next slide just shows the different accommodations. The first, the one on the right is our largest. Those are our luxury suites, and they are our most private. They're about 8 feet by 8 feet. They have a TV in them that plays Animal Planet or the dog channel. And then we have our most popular is our executive room. It's a private 5x7 room. And then we also have traditional compartment style accommodations as well. There are a lot of dogs, especially smaller ones, who are crate trained at home and who actually prefer to sleep in a more enclosed space. So we have those for those types of dogs. And then we also have our doggy daycare, which has a lot of benefits. It's good socialization for the dogs. It's fun working there. You see dogs actually have certain dogs that they're friends with and get excited to see each day. It gives them a lot of exercise and keeps them, if the owner is working out of the home, it keeps the dog from getting lonely and possibly destroying things in the house. Dogs that board, most of them do the daycare during the day, and we do have times where daycare dogs can end up spending the night. The daycares are broken into 2 groups. We have a small dog daycare and a large dog daycare. The cutoff is about 30 pounds in size, give or take a few depending on temperament. Any dog coming into our daycare has to go through an evaluation. They also have to be up to date on all of their vaccinations. So for the evaluation, we are first introducing them to one dog at a time, making sure they are doing okay, and then we take them in with the group and monitor them for the day. And we don't just look to make sure that a dog isn't aggressive. We want to make sure that the dogs in our daycare are happy. So if a dog is terrified, we don't accept them into our daycare. If a dog just sits in the daycare and barks all day, we don't accept them in. Every daycare is staffed at all times with trained attendants who go through a rigorous training program. It's both an online program with testing and on-the-job training where they're matched up with a supervisor. There are also, the daycares are inside and out, fresh water at all times. The insides are air conditioned and heated. As I mentioned, we also have our personal playtimes for dogs who can't be in the daycares. Those dogs never pass by another dog when they're in the facility. We always use radios to make sure the halls are clear. All dogs are always leashed going to and from their rooms to the play yards or to the bathing areas. One of our principles is when we have a dog who spends more than one night, we want to make sure that they go home smelling fresh and clean. So we require baths for any of those dogs, and we offer baths to any of our clients who request one as well. And if a dog gets dirty in daycare, or while boarding, we do a bath free of charge to make sure they're not spending the day filthy. In terms of operations and safety, the resort will have surveillance cameras, security systems, sprinkler systems, alarms. We partner with local vets so that if there is any reason we need to have the dog seen by a vet, the vets know us, and they're great as far as fitting us in when needed. And as mentioned before, we have vaccination requirements for all dogs. So any guests coming in for either daycare or boarding are pre-registered. So daycare, the drop-off is less than 30 seconds. They literally walk in the door, they hand us the leash, we greet the dogs, have a good day, and take the dog back. Boarding check-in is a little bit longer, but it still typically takes less than 3 minutes. We go over emergency contact information, make sure we have the feeding down, any medications they need, what time they're being picked up. It's a very quick process, and the pickup times are even quicker for both. Okay, as far as hours of operations, the facility's open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 9 to 5:30 on weekends. Daycare check-in, daycare is the full time. Boarding, however, we limit to 9 to 5:30, 7 days a week. And that is so that because the boarding check-ins take a little longer, most of the daycare rush is completed or hasn't started yet in the evening when the boarders are coming and going. So it keeps the parking lot flowing, it keeps the lobby flowing, and just means less wait time for the customers as well. And on weekends, we typically have considerably less traffic. Even though we're busier boarding, we only have a handful of drop-off daycare dogs on most weekends. Except for this weekend, we're doing a Super Puppy Bowl, Super Bowl that lots of people are signed up for. Seasonality, we have peak and off-peak. Really, any holidays and all summer are our peak. And what typically happens, the boarding reservations go up, but we have less dogs in daycare because a lot of people are off work, off school. And then the last thing for reference is just, we don't have any big semis bringing deliveries. It's, local, it's Amazon, UPS, FedEx is typically what we see. So there's not anything intrusive, and they're relatively small deliveries where the person's in and out rather quickly.
Christine, could you address the number of dogs, how that kind of works, and then how you control the outside area as far as when the dogs are out there, when you walk through that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I know our application is for a maximum of 125 dogs. That is during peak times. We might hit that. Typically, it's much lower. And the daycares have doors that go directly to the outside. So at any time, and the rooms don't have any runs where they can go outside directly from their room. So the only time the dogs can be outside is when there's an attendant in the daycare with them or in our private play yard with one of the dogs. If the weather is inclement or if any of the dogs start to get rowdy, we just can pull them inside and close the doors and just allow them to play inside and then open it for a few minutes every hour in the case of where it's too hot, too cold. If there is a dog who seems like they won't settle down and is getting the whole group riled up, we will give them a break in one of the rooms until he calms down.
How many parking places do you have at your Horsham location now?
15.
15. And that's sufficient?
Yes.
One of the things that we discussed, and our engineer will be touching on that, is the fact that we'd prefer to have as little parking, only the required parking, and not overdo it, because again, that's going to cut down more trees and cause more disruption. So we prefer when we get, if you folks kind of agree that this is a good use, when we go in front of the zoning board, we'll be asking for some parking relief to try to, again, get to what we need for our particular use.
Yeah, and we've never had an issue with parking, and I don't recall a time where there were more than maybe 4 customers' cars parked in front at once.
Okay. I want to just back up a second. Now that you've kind of seen the canine operation, I'd like to take you and show you the comparison. I'm sure many of you at least have heard, if you haven't seen it, the kennel that's in town. For those of you who are a little bit newer, for years and years it was known as the Makefield Kennels. Today it's called the Yardley Kennel, and what we're putting up there on the aerial right now is a picture that shows the outside dog runs, the general condition. We take a look at the front of the building. We kind of have a picture of that. It's really totally different. As I said, I wouldn't even call it a Motel 6 versus a Ritz-Carlton. It's been there for 100 years, 75 years, and it is what it is. I want to show you the design that we're proposing, and even though I understand we don't have to go in front of HARP as a requirement because we're not required to, we plan on going to HARP, showing them their building, if you want to bring that up, that we're proposing, and what we've basically talking about a design of a building that kind of resembles a barn. The cigar shop is actually in an old barn, and we certainly kind of tried to keep that theme, and we would certainly take under advisement anything in HARP or the Board of Supervisors might suggest to, again, try to blend the building into the wooded and the charm of the old historic district. I think next we'll call up Canine Corporate Kevin Tennant, who can kind of speak to the operations of Canine in general. I think Kevin is best suited to kind of deal with how nationally they deal with the dog waste, and that's very well controlled. Christine can go back and answer any questions about how she handles that, but it's certainly something everybody always has a concern about because if we have 80, 90 dogs here, there's going to be a certain amount of waste that's created. It has to be disposed of properly. Kevin?
Good evening. My name's Kevin Tennant. I am Vice President of Franchise Operations at Canine Resorts. I've worked closely with Christine for a long time. So I've been with the company for 5.5 years, and I've known Christine that entire time.
Excuse me, Mr. Tennant, have you been sworn in?
I swore.
You were?
Yeah, I was
Okay,
sworn in
just
the
wanted to
same time.
confirm. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So as Christine said, we currently have 41 operating locations in 27 states. And many of them are in different type of developments. Some of them are in commercial retail areas. Some are in industrial flex locations. All are within proximity to a residential area, but none of them are right next door. We have one location in Houston where there's no zoning laws for residential or commercial. So we have one that just opened right next door. But our flagship location in Fanwood is located pretty close to residential. We have a New Jersey Transit train that goes right behind our facility, and right across that train track is a residential area. And we've never had any complaints as far as noise, odor, or anything like that in any of our operating resorts. We do take pride in our operations, both from taking care, being a good neighbor in our areas, making sure that we're not an annoyance. We want to be a good neighbor to everybody there. So as Christine mentioned, most of the time the dogs are inside the building, inside the play area. But we do give breaks for the dogs to go outside, run around in our secured play yard, just for them to get fresh air, use the facilities, and then they'll run back into the building, and they're secured inside daycare. We do take care of the dogs, as Christine said. We want to make sure that they are enjoying their time at Canine. We don't do anything that dogs don't like, so we don't cut their hair, we don't trim their nails. We just create a fun environment for them. So if you've ever seen a canine, you see dogs literally run into the building and don't want to leave because they're really, truly enjoying their time there. As far as safety and security, again, our outdoor areas, we use rotationally molded fences that absorb 98% of direct sound waves. So the 8-foot fence is for the security of the dogs, to keep the dogs in and keep people out. Believe it or not, dogs can actually jump a 6-foot fence, which is why we go for an 8-foot fence to keep them secure. And our turf yard is almost like an artificial turf without backfill. So our turf, our outdoor area, operates like your backyard would do. So if your dog urinated on your grass, it percolates into the ground soil below. And we do sanitize many times a day, as Christine can attest to, using our hospital-grade cleaners. We have two main cleaners. One is called Rescue. It's a hydrogen peroxide-based cleaner that kills basically any pathogen and odor. And on top of that, we use something called Odor Pet, which is a bacterial enzyme that breaks down organic material that would also cause any sort of illness and odor. So when you walk into a canine and there's a number of dogs in there, you do not smell any dogs whatsoever because of our cleaning protocols and our operations. So it's truly a very tightened up operation to make sure that the dogs are in a safe and comfortable environment.
Kevin, what's the maximum number of dogs that any of your operations might handle?
So that depends on the size of the building. So for example, Fanwood, which is the original location, the flagship, is about 16,000 square feet. And the size of that building could accommodate up to 250 dogs for overnight boarding. They have not reached that number, but they do have the ability to do so. We do have a calculation that is required of all of our franchise locations of how many dogs are allowed to be in any of our daycares. So for a large dog, we require 18 square feet for each dog. So we'll make that calculation based on the size of the playroom, divided by 18. That's the number of dogs that are allowed in our daycare. And then we apply that capacity into our reservation system. For a small dog, it is 12 square feet per dog. So again, we make that calculation for our daycares. For overnight boarding, we try to utilize as much space as possible to drive revenue. We want our franchise owners to be successful business owners, so we make sure that we are utilizing as much space as possible to drive the revenue. As Christine said, the size of this building here could accommodate 125 dogs based on the overnight boarding, and that is not something that happens 365 days a year, I can assure you that. It happens during peak times, maybe around holiday weekends for July 4th, Labor Day, Memorial Day. So those are the times where we would really truly hit peak capacity. But on a daily basis, we're nowhere near that. And the number of dogs that are in the building are split between large and small dogs. So they're not all 100 dogs in one area, which could definitely create some chaos.
If Christine mentioned this, I apologize, but you have a standard of how many dogs you allow outside at one time? Isn't there, there's kind of a rule of thumb on that?
Yeah, so again, that would be based on the capacity for each playroom. And when we open the doors, not all the dogs like going outside. Some of them like staying inside the building. So we will, we'll make sure that we're not bum rushing all, we'll say, 40 dogs are in large dog daycare at one time. I would say maybe half of them would, stay inside. Some of them will go outside, play, and then they'll come back in again.
Just maybe one more time, just talk about the fence and the sound. We're going to get into that with the sound engineer, but talk about how that's kind of evolved to where it is today.
Absolutely. So back in the early days of K9, we had just pure residential fencing, a white vinyl fence. We now, for the last 5 years, utilize a material or product called BuffTech. It is the same type of material that's used on highway projects to be a sound buffer between residential and highways. It's a rotationally molded fence, so there's no slats or grooves. It's a solid fence that has a stonework appeal to it. And it's got sound mitigating qualities that absorbs 98% of direct sound waves. So when you imagine the average dog is about 2 feet off the ground and we have 8-foot fences, that sound of a barking dog directly at that fence is being absorbed by that material and not finding its way out of the area. The outdoor turf also acts as a buffer to absorb sound. So, our outdoor areas are very secure and then also has the qualities to mitigate all those noises.
Christine is committed to this site as an operator for the next 20-plus years. If something were to interfere with that, Could you explain kind of the obligation or the responsibilities that K-9 Corporate would have if for some reason Christine was unable to continue as the operator?
Sure, absolutely. So one, we work very closely with our franchise owners, and if Christine were to make the decision to exit the franchise, we would work with her on someone to assume the business. Christine would not be able to just find anybody and say, hey, take over my business. They would have to go through a vetting process with our corporate office. They would have to go through about 3 months of vetting with our sales team, with the corporate team. They would have to go through the same processes that Christine did to become a franchise owner. And then ultimately, we would work with Mr. Rusk as well to ensure that we had the right operator to take over the business.
But basically, K-9 Corporate is committed to the site
Of course,
for the next 20-plus years.
absolutely.
Okay, I'm sure there may be questions, but why don't, if you don't mind, we'll go ahead and finish up, and then everybody will be available to ask any specific questions. At this point, I'd like to have Ryan Whitmore, our civil engineer. Even though this isn't a site plan approval, I think it's important that he kind of show you, from an environmental standpoint, what we're trying to achieve, kind of how we have it set up from a sound standpoint, and touch a little bit on the parking and why we may be asking for some reduced parking based on our specific use and needs. And I'll turn it over to Kevin to talk about those issues from that standpoint.
Good evening, everybody. Ryan Whitmore. I'm the project civil engineer. Together with others from my firm, we had prepared the zoning plan, which is up on the screen here. So just walking through the site layout before we get into the details that Ron had teed up, where you can see here the daycare, the kindercare is on the plan right-hand side, so the east side. The west side is where the proposed development lot is located. The K-9 Resorts is 8,245 square feet, and then adjacent to that is a spec retail building, so 3,400 square feet. So tonight's the subject purely of the K-9 Resort, but from an overall planning and layout and design and just overall feasibility, it's appropriate to talk about the retail use, even though that's not the specific topic of tonight's discussion for the conditional use. So as you can see, the building itself is tucked all the way in that left corner, where just off to the bottom left of the plan is the 295 Expressway. The Patterson Farm is to the northwest. So it's really the plan and the building and the outdoor play area, which is just off the rear of the K-9 building, is appropriately located, tucked away, facing really the most undeveloped portion of the property and the surrounding area, so that it's adjacent to the ambient noisy parts of the property, which is the expressway, which our sound engineer is going to further elaborate on. And the brown shaded area that's on the left side of the K-9 space, that's the location that Kevin had explained. That's the outdoor exercise and daycare area. That's going to be surrounded on 3 sides by the 8-foot tall fence, and then the 4th side is obviously the building. So the building itself is going to act as that physical barrier that separates the outdoor exercise and play area from the rest of the property and the daycare. So it's really effectively screened, and the building itself acts as that physical barrier that's going to block the sound that could potentially travel in that planned easterly direction where all the actual development is located surrounding the property. So there is, under the kennel ordinance, there is in addition to the minimum lot area, there's a minimum setback for any outdoor exercise or animal housing as it's related to a dog kennel. So that's a 150-foot setback from any property line, which the closest corner of the playground, the outdoor play area, is about 59 feet from the property line. So that will be a topic of discussion that would be had with the zoning hearing board should we receive a favorable opinion and approval from the board this evening. As for the actual lot makeup, the overall tract is about 7 acres. The lot area is split about 60-40. So from an overall acreage and a lot area, the K-9 lot is about 4 acres, and then the balance of the lot area will be the kindercare. So 60% of the lot area is on the canine side, and then the 40 is on the daycare side. And you can see that the subdivision line itself is the black dashed out line that's right in between the kindercare and the canine. And it generally follows the limits of the outdoor existing playground of the daycare now. So really the woods line. So where the wood line ends and the daycare developed portion of the property begins, that essentially will be the proposed subdivision line. So there is a minimum lot area standard and under the kennel ordinance as well of 5 acres. So it's a 4.152 acre lot that's proposed for canine, so that will be another topic of discussion with the zoning hearing board, where relief would be required from that minimum lot area standard. When we spoke with the Planning Commission as part of the presentation and meeting in October, they had made a recommendation for the existing fence that surrounds the kindercare outdoor play area. They had requested that fence be extended down to the street, just as an additional physical separation and a barrier between the existing daycare use and the proposed development lot. Access is coming off of Stony Hill Road, so it directly aligns with the medical office building that's directly across the street. So it's really the existing gravel driveway now that provides access to the Patterson farm in the back. That will be repurposed and reestablished, slightly widened to accommodate the necessary vehicles. So any vehicles or patrons of the canine or the retail space, garbage trucks, emergency response vehicles, all those appropriate turning movements have been designed and circulated. And we've also included a truck movement plan as part of the slide deck here, which I can walk you through in a minute. But from an overall access perspective, it's really repurposing of the existing gravel driveway in an effort to just minimize the overall tree disturbance and redevelop the property. The parking lot itself proposes 34 parking spaces. In total, when you break down each use by code, when you strictly look at the code requirements, a dog kennel requires parking based on the number of animals and the number of employees. So 1 stall per 8 dogs or animals and 1 stall per employee. So based on the operations of the proposed kennel, plus the retail use, that works out to a total required parking requirement of 48.3 parking stalls. The application proposes 34. Christine had mentioned that they have 15 spaces in their Horsham location. We would offer 20, just as not to just go with the bare bones, the bare minimum of what they offer or they currently need in their Horsham location. There would be that minimum plus an additional 5-space buffer. And then for the retail space, that the code requires 6.67 spaces per 1,000 square feet. So it's or 1 per 150 square feet of space. In the interest of really not providing any more parking than would be necessary, we're proposing a 4 stall per 1,000 parking ratio, which when looking at a site plan design, there is a design scenario where we can strictly conform and provide the minimum necessary parking to satisfy the zoning requirements. But in the interest of really minimizing the development footprint, minimizing impervious, tree disturbance, land disturbance, we're proposing and would request relief from the zoning hearing board to only provide the parking that we feel is necessary, and all the appropriate testimony and proofs would be put in place to justify that parking number. So just from an overall parking standard that we're trying to follow, that's the methodology that's being followed. But it's all really in the interest of minimizing that development footprint. Loading, Christine had mentioned that it's a fairly light-duty loading operation that they would demand. So the code does require a specific designated loading stall be provided. However, relief is being requested to not provide that in the interest of just minimizing impervious, the development footprint, et cetera. Trash collection, there is an masonry block, decorative trash enclosure that's right in the middle of the driveway. I guess if you just pull straight in off of Stony Hill Road, you can see it's going to be a decorative trash enclosure that any garbage collection vehicle can just pull straight in, back straight out, and exit the same way that they entered the property. Stormwater management, it is not necessarily a topic of typically of conditional use. However, in the interest of planning and overall feasibility of design, you can see that there's a green shaded out shape that's towards the back of the property within what was the access easement that connects Stony Hill Road to the Patterson Farm. That green shaded out area it's already cleared for the existing driveway. It would only be appropriate for that area to be repurposed in an effort to minimize that tree disturbance and still satisfy the stormwater needs of the project and to provide consistency with the stormwater management ordinance. We've also gone as far as done some preliminary stormwater testing. So there are positive infiltration rates, which is one of the proponents of the stormwater ordinance. So there is feasibility related to that location and the provision for an above-ground stormwater management facility to satisfy those needs once the project, well, if the project advances to the point of land development. Signage, it will be a fairly modest sign package that will be very similar to what exists at the daycare next door. It's going to be a combination of a freestanding monument sign. So I'm just going to point to it on the screen here where it's really right at the entrance. It's a very small 12 square foot monument sign that's going to have the canine logo on it. And then there's also going to be a wall mounted sign above the entrance to the canine at the main entrance. The HC signage code does require, or does limit the number of signs to just one 12 square foot sign, which that would also be a discussion with the zoning hearing board for relief for the provision to include that additional 12 square foot sign in addition to the one along the street. From an URSA standpoint, the existing resources, the only existing resource that's regulated by zoning are the woodlands, which, as I explained, were the intent of the overall project and site design is to really minimize the footprint and minimize the impact to the trees. So from an overview of a site plan perspective, that about wraps it up. I probably have given you more detail than you care to know, but from an overall feasibility and planning standpoint, we've put a lot of thought into the layout, really tried to minimize the amount of relief that we feel is necessary to accommodate the needs of the proposed development.
I would like to point out that in the discussion of the subdivision, over the last year and a half, we've gone back and forth with staff, and we would really leave it up to staff and the Board of Supervisors when we come back for site plan approval, whether you feel it's necessary. It really doesn't make any difference to us as the owners, whether it's a subdivision or not a subdivision. It's keeping it one parcel is certainly okay with us. Okay, I think we'll ask our sound engineer, Ben Mueller. He's on the Zoom call. Ben has an awful lot of information. He's summarized it in the report that we gave you. He also has a much more extensive report, which we could make available if the board would like to read through that. But what Ben will show you is the results of his sound study and his experience with dealing with this type of operation as I said, around the country. Ben, are you ready to go?
Yes. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, and we do need to swear you in, Mr. Euler, so do it remotely.
I think you might have to go off to see him on Zoom. I don't know, how does that work?
You can use the one right in front of you.
There you go, okay.
There you go.
Are you able to hear me, sir?
I can.
Do you swear the testimony you'll give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, good evening, Ben Muller with the firm Ostergaard Acoustical Associates. We are a consulting firm that only focuses on noise control, and mitigation and evaluation. Just a brief background on myself. I've been working in this field for about 25 years now. My background is a mechanical engineer. I have undergrad from Villanova University and my graduate degree is from Stevens Institute. I am a licensed professional engineer in Oregon and New Jersey, but my context here tonight is really to just provide a discussion with my experience in noise control and our involvement with this project. So if I can, do I have the ability to share my screen here?
Yeah, just stuff, don't you have his stuff on your screen? Yeah.
Yep, I'm just bringing it up, a little segue.
Oh, he's gonna do it, okay. Yeah.
Okay, can we see that?
Yes, we see it.
Okay, thanks. So this is just an aerial overlay. It's a combination of a Google Earth aerial with the same site plan that Ryan had just previously shown. And what I want to do is just use this as a starting point. Just note that with the orientation, that north is to the top left of the drawing. We see in the center the Canine Resorts proposal. The dog run area, the outdoor part, is on the left side of the page, and you can see it's surrounded by the greenery, the landscaping. Then I also have some distances shown. So if we go almost southeast, but plan right, we see about a 365-foot distance from the outdoor play area to the outdoor play area of the kinder care. If we look 385 feet due south, we see the nearest single-family residences are in that direction. And then if we go almost southwest, page down, 270 feet away, we have a senior living facility, and that's the distance from the outdoor area to that facility. Just to touch upon noise regulations briefly, I don't want to get too technical, but we do have regulations that provide us with our prime directives under the Lower Makefield Zoning Code, Chapter 200-66. It discusses different ways to regulate different types of noise. Provides limits here for continuous noise being something that is steady in nature. So more like mechanical equipment, HVAC, that type of operation where it would operate for long periods of time. And the limits we see here are pretty general within the industry. So 65 at industrial receptors, 60 for commercial receptors, and 55 for residential receptors. And this is during the daytime hours. During the corresponding nighttime hours, the limits are slightly lower, reduced by 3 dB for all receptors. And we find that those are pretty common metrics that are seen for different jurisdictions, whether it be under the state or local ordinances. Just to give a comparison of the purposes behind these, 60 to 65 showing as an acceptable limit for commercial industrial sources. Those are going to be limits designed to protect speech discussions, ensure that you don't have to raise your voice in order to be heard. That's the type of level when we are in that low to mid 60s. As we get to residential receptors, obviously residences have the probability of being more noise sensitive, so more stringent criteria apply. 55 during the daytime is pretty stringent, considering that most ambient activity, which is going to be your local and distant traffic, will generally be higher in that. But if we were to apply this into a suburban residential neighborhood, I could see 55 as being something very appropriate. And then at nighttime, limits are even lower to be considerate for sleeping accommodations. Now, the performance standards have some specifics, and those are going to be relative to parts of our application. One is that it says that if noise occurs for less than 5% of any 1 hour, which is 3 minutes in a 60-minute period, that limits are given a 5 dB more permissive adjustment. And the reason behind that is because when you look at a continuous noise versus one that occurs sporadically or intermittently, you are more tolerable of higher levels of short duration. If we were to say that an emergency generator or a fan, exhaust fan would be at a high level for a longer period of time, that would certainly be more grating on the public and more likely to result in noise issues. We also have special provisions in the code that how to apply impulsive sounds, and this is very applicable to our site because we'll hear in a second when we talk about dog noise. Barking is impulsive in nature, and by impulsive we define that as having a period of less than 1 second. So a dog bark, a door close, a bang, those are all instances of what would be an impulsive noise and having a very high level but short duration. And so the performance standards looks at that by saying we're not going to look at the max of that impulsive sound, but rather the average pressure during the impulse. The background for the purpose of this is not clear, but that's okay. We're going through the facts here, and then when we talk about how we apply it, we have to do some meaningful and logical interpretations of things. And lastly, the code points out that these limits apply at the property line where the source occurs based on the receptor category. So the way that this is worded is that for our facility, we would be a commercial receptor, but that doesn't matter. It's that if our neighbor is considered residential, then you would apply that limit in that property line in that direction. Lastly, just to touch upon Chapter 79, specifically talks about animals, which is our key topic here tonight. It's going to prohibit animals from disturbing the peace by repeated loud noises, and Animal Control Authority would investigate such nuisances. So zoning performance standard discusses noise in a quantitative manner. 79 for animals is more of a qualitative. In other words, if something was being a nuisance, that you would call and report it, and it would get addressed, much like shutting down a loud party after hours. There are no Pennsylvania state or Bucks County codes that are applied to site sound emissions. So just some interpretation and some discussion of things. The first of which is that it's more on the unique side. I talked about how I thought the limits within the township are appropriate and are routinely seen, but want to just touch upon that applying the standard at the property line of the source is generally not a logical follow through. Certainly, if we were talking about a series of houses and that a common property line, and that's where you would evaluate things, that certainly makes the most sense. But when you look at the interesting aspects of our project, we do share a property line with the kinder care, but in the other directions, as we showed in our aerial earlier, not only do we have an entire right of way of a street there, but also you start to consider other elements that you're applying this at a property line where someone may or may not be. And in our situation here, our common property lines in all directions, including the kinder care, are not specifically the areas of repose where a receptor would be and potentially exposed to sound. So we do see that some interpretation is required in judgment. As a noise engineer, my focus is on upholding the health, safety, and well-being of the public. Obviously, that's first and foremost. And while the code gives levels and directives, the agenda here is that you introduce a new source to the area that isn't going to result in widespread complaints or any negative impact. So we will use these judgment terms on our evaluation, which we'll discuss next. Dog barking is only going to occur during the daytime. We heard testimony from Christine earlier discussing the hours of operation. So the overnight dogs, while there will be dogs present during the nighttime hours, they are not going to be let out. They're not going to be allowed to exercise, utilize the bathroom, etc. There'll be a final final call, if you will, and then they'll be put in for the night. So my analysis here is focusing only on daytime activity. We're also going to apply the performance standard correction or adjustment that says that for noise that occurs for only 5% of the hour, that we can be a bit more permissible. And that's because dog barking will not occur for more than a 3-minute period in a given hour. We heard testimony from both how Canine operates their franchises as well as the owner operator here. Dogs are going to be brought out in batches of say 10 to 30, but that if there were instances of excitement and barking, that is what the personnel is there for, is that they would de-escalate the situation by removing the dog who is barking out until they were calm enough to do so. And the idea wouldn't be that for the period of outdoor exercising that it's not a cacophony of excited dogs. That's not helpful for the neighborhood, and it's also not helpful for the dogs, because the more riled up they get, then it becomes a more stressful environment for them. So given all of my discussion and assessment here on the applicable codes, we're going to apply as a project goal for this application that we want to strive to not exceed 60 at residences and 65 at commercial. And that's based on the code, as well as the adjustment factors that are allowed, and then also applying these limits at the area where public receptors will actually be. Just to give us a broadband, I discussed our levels in somewhat of a general aspect, but typical car pass-bys, given that our common entity here is a local street with local street traffic, that 60-65 is going to ostensibly be a typical level for an active roadway as such. And we did do ambient data monitoring, and we'll show that in a minute here as well. But the point being that while the codes stand on their own relative, irrelevant of what the actual ambient levels are, having an active streetway be present is going to help to mask and kind of provide a blending of any barking that would be audible off-site. All right, so on to the analysis. Again, I try to keep this high level and generic. I want to just talk about it as a logical approach. Should there be specific questions or want to get into details, we can certainly do so. But we had previously visited the flagship site at Fanwood, which we heard is also a larger facility than what's proposed here. I had spent a half a day there for a period for a different project, but certainly relevant for this, as it is another franchise. We had a situation where standing at a vantage point, a distance away from the property, I had the personnel through text messages let out a collection of dogs as they would in their normal routine. In this instance, it was 30 dogs. I had to connect with them after a few minutes to say, I'm ready for you to let the dogs out. And they said the dogs have been out for 5 minutes. So the experience that we had observed, not only during that measurement session, but also during the hours that I was at the site, is that the doggy daycare facility is not the same visual. I know I have we were talking a little bit about the references to a kennel. I always think about 101 Dalmatians and having dogs just be in cages. So this is more of a relaxed environment for dogs. And when dogs are calm and relaxed, they aren't excited and barking. So despite that being my occurrence and experience and what I'm explaining tonight, that really doesn't go well to providing me with an acoustical analysis to help discuss what happens when a dog does bark. We can't possibly be sitting here saying that a dog will never bark. I don't find that to be factual. So what we did was we arranged to have a larger dog breed. In this instance, it was a Doberman Pinscher. And we arranged to have a measurement where the dog was excited and prompt to provide a string of barks while I was taking a measurement on the other side of a PVC style vinyl fence. And so multiple dog barks occur in sequence, again, impulsive, so they're short in duration. So you end up with a series of bark, 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 a delay, bark, bark, etc. I think we all know how a traditional dog bark it sounds like. But putting that into numbers, we had average maximum levels of 77, and the highest of the entire duration of the flurry of sparks was 80 dB, measured at 25 feet. Now, those data take into account that PVC style fence that was in between us. So what I do is consider that my raw data, and I say, well, what happens when we apply that at this proposed facility, and how might that dog bark travel off site and impact our surrounding area? So just using distance alone, we know that sound is just another science. It follows the laws of physics. The further away sound gets, the more energy is drained, and the lower in level sound becomes. So recalling my initial slide where I had an aerial and several distances, to the KinderCare, which is to the east, 365 feet away, that level of Doberman Pinscher barking would end up being in the around a 54 dB as an average and 57 as the maximum. The senior facility, 270 feet away, which is the closest, and also has the only vantage point that has direct line of sight to the outdoor activity center area, levels of 56 average and 59 max. And then for the residences that are to the south, levels of 53 as on average and 56 as a maximum. So again, as a high level, we start out, and that is a great place to start. Trying to add a little bit more definition and detail into our analysis. We know that as we heard from the canine representative, the improvement of the fence. I've been involved in the various products and also can corroborate much of what his high level discussion was. Essentially, a vinyl fence is going to have a weight of about 1 to 1.5 pounds per square foot.
Ben,
yes.
if I could interrupt for a second, I really think we should just kind of highlight one thing, if I could. In your experience and professional opinion, you think what are the chances of there being any sort of a detrimental effect to the neighbors, given the building, the wooded area, the location, the sound, fence, and so forth? Do you think that could possibly have a detrimental effect on the residential neighborhood?
Detrimental is not the right word, Ron, but that's exactly where I'm at here in our discussion here. As I did a projection based on data measured with the PVC fence, I wanted to provide additional adjustments. So we know that the daycare and the residences are significantly screened by the proposed building. That building is going to provide a considerable amount of reduction, well above and beyond what the PVC fence showed in my data measurements. So if we took a nominal 10 dB credit for the building, in reality, I think it would probably be closer to 15 to 20 or more. But again, a nominal 10 dB credit. Okay. And then we look at the fact that we have, instead of 1.5 pounds, PVC fence that going with the BuffTech product that is a molded material. The fact that it's molded provides it with a denser cavity, whereas PVC fences are hollow. So the fence that we're talking about tonight, which is proposed in the project, is more 3 pounds per square foot. So it's a heftier fence, and it's that heft that provides it with the more robust mitigation effects. So taking that into account, I want to adjust my numbers a little bit more here, and we start to continue to slide down in a positive manner. But at the KinderCare and the residences, we have levels that are far below 50 now, with the highest being 46 and 47. And then to the senior facility, where we don't get the same credit as from the building, but yet still additional credit from the improved acoustical fence, levels of 53 on average and 56 on max.
Well, Ben,
So,
Ben, let's, I think you've made your point. I think the Board of Supervisors may have a couple questions when we wrap this up. So I think it might be appropriate if we could just move on to our traffic engineer and just talk about the traffic at this point, and then kind of circle
Sure,
back
I
if
just
there's
have two more-
any other questions the board might have for you.
I just have 2 more slides though, Ron. If you want me, give me 2 more minutes. I'll be brief. I don't want to be the only technical dry presentation of the evening, so that's not my intent. But okay, high level, we also did our ambient survey, which we had just touched upon. Again, bringing up my figure, One monitor was placed set back in the rear parking lot of the kindercare, which is in the direction of the playground, and then another one was set further down the road at an area which was set off from Stony Hill Road, set back approximately the same distance as those residences and the senior facility. And so now what I have is going to be two graphs. This is going to be showing the time history, which is minute by minute plotting the average level that was documented across a weekend period in almost a year. Well, a year ago today, in fact, was when we did the survey. But what we see in blue is the levels that were measured, and that's dominated by intermittent vehicle activity, either locally or distant. And you see that during the daytime, sound levels are their highest, and they exceed 65 on the regular. And then during the nighttime, levels drop down as low as about 35 or so for at least a minute or so. But what I want to show is the lines, gray and orange. Gray represent the maximum bark, which is showing here at 56 at the senior facility, and then the average bark of 53 at the senior facility. And when you overlay these onto the existing conditions, realizing that location 1 is not on the same side as the senior facility, but you can see that the gray line is well below most, if not all, of the daytime activity that is currently prevalent in the area. It's only during the nighttime hours that you see the gray line might itself become the dominant entity, in which case it would be audible, but we are not proposing to have dog activity in the outside during those hours. And then just to finish up with our location 2, very similar trend, highs during the day, lows during the night. We see that there's even higher locations there, might be from being slightly closer to Stony Hill, but again, even a greater story to tell in terms of the ability to even hear offsite dog barking. So the summary speaks for itself. We meet code in a way that I find to be a meaningful way to apply it, and the purpose, of course, which to not have a negative impact on the area and to blend in with the existing conditions. We showed that the ambient is well above what a bark sound would be. However, in the instance that it is audible, it wouldn't be an outlier for things that are already occurring in the vicinity. And so based on all the above, then now we can get to traffic and talk about that topic here.
Okay, thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. And if you stand by, if the board has any questions after Peter finishes up, we'll kick them up. Next up will be our traffic engineer, Peter. Peter will discuss basically the traffic that'll be generated, particularly in respect to other uses that are permitted within the historic commercial zone. Go ahead, Peter. I think you need to be sworn in.
Yeah.
You swear the testimony you'll give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I do.
And can you spell your last name?
Spisszak. All right, Michael,
Okay.
all good?
Yeah.
All right. So my name is Pete Spisszak. I'm with Traffic Planning and Design. I have 25 years experience doing any traffic impact studies, parking studies, trip generation studies, you name it. With regard to traffic, I've probably done a project or two. I'm gonna share my screen. I just have one slide, which is did that come through?
No, we don't see it yet. Now we have it.
All right. So a traffic count, a trip generation count was done at an existing canine resorts to determine, and that same canine resorts had 120 dogs capacity. So we determined that based on that count, the canine resorts would, generate 57 a.m. peak hour trips and 52 p.m. peak hour trips. And you can see the enter and exit trips on the slide. In addition to the Canine Resorts, we have that 3,400 square feet of general retail. That trip generation was based off of the Institute of Transportation Engineers trip generation manual. It's an industry standard we have to utilize for any type of, typical use. And as you can see there, the retail would generate 14 a.m. peak hour trips and 36 p.m. peak hour trips. So for your grand total, your AM peak hour would generate 71 total trips, and your PM peak hour would generate 88 trips. And that would be consistent with some other uses that are allowable in this zoning district. Like a medical office or a restaurant or something of that nature. So from a trip generation standpoint, this proposed use would be consistent with, other permitted uses in the zoning district. I would mention that Stony Hill Road at the proposed access, which, it's the existing gravel driveway, which is opposite the driveway for the assisted living facility. There are left turn lanes that already exist on Stony Hill Road for the site. This driveway would be subject to a highway occupancy permit that we would have to get from PennDOT. So PennDOT would potentially require a study. Now, PennDOT's standards for a traffic study are when you generate over 100 directional trips in an hour. So as you can see from this trip generation, we don't meet that threshold. However, they could come back and ask us just for an access analysis or something of, something like a little smaller than a traffic study where we would have to analyze the access. However, like I said, typically when we do an access analysis, we're just looking to see, one, how the access would operate, and two, whether or not turn lanes would be required. And we already have left turn lanes that currently exist. So from a traffic perspective, I don't feel as though this would be detrimental to the area. It wouldn't cause any undue congestion, as the driveway will have to be designed appropriately and approved by PennDOT.
Okay, thank you, Peter. A final question, just to kind of emphasize. Do you see this use as having any sort of a detrimental effect on the neighborhood vis-a-vis other potential permitted uses within the zone?
No.
Okay, thank you. I just want to wrap everything up before we take any questions. Thank you for your time this evening. Again, our purpose this evening was to present a use that we think is needed in the township. We think this is the last piece of ground within this particular area. We'd like to protect the wooded area. We strongly believe we don't need any more banks, we don't need any more restaurants, we don't need any more apartments. And we think this use being the type it is, we can save a lot of trees, we can provide a service that the residents need, and we kind of think it fits within at least what was envisioned, long ago as a kind of a neighborhood community use. I think John has a couple of things he wants to add at this point before you take any questions. Oh, he's not here. Oh, there he is.
Good evening. John Fenningham for the applicant, MRG. First, I'd like to ask to qualify each of the three experts, Mr. Whitmore as a site engineer, Mr. Mueller as a acoustic sound engineer, and Mr. Spizak as a traffic engineer. They stated their qualifications, and they have length of experience, and you see their reports. They're qualified to present the testimony to you as an expert this evening.
Does anybody on the board have any objections to the admittance of these gentlemen as experts? No? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I'd also like to, just for housekeeping, for applicants' exhibits, just so we can mark those accordingly. For the record, I've just marked as A1 the video that was presented.
Correct.
A2 is the slides presented by Christine Miller. A3, the presentation or slides by Mr. Ryan Whitmore. A4, presentation or slides by Mr. Ben Mueller. And A5, the presentation and the slide by Mr. Spizak.
Okay, and before the session started, we supplied your solicitor with a letter from the KinderCare. However, that letter is already in your package. It's the 9th page of Exhibit A4. It is a letter on the letterhead of KinderCare, the daycare that's been there for 20 years. That letter, and I'll just summarize, makes 2 points. One is there's no objection to this use, the canine resort on the premises. In fact, the second point is KinderCare considers it complementary to their activities and operations. In fact, they think people will drop off their children and then drop off their dogs, and they really see that as compatible use on the property.
Thank you, and we'll mark that as Exhibit A6.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Also, I don't believe it was mentioned tonight that the kennel as a defined use is permitted in the commercial or C district. However, there's no available space to accommodate the canine resort in the township in the C district. So we actually came before you to say we are asking for this conditional use based on all the presentation tonight because, in my view, the simplest answer to a use application before your zoning hearing board would be it's self-imposed. So I don't want to admit that we wouldn't get relief, but it possibly could be futile to try to seek that relief when you have 5 elements of a variance relief that all 5 of which must be satisfied. So we welcome the opportunity to come before you because you've allowed a conditional use application in the HC district, and so we're taking advantage of that to ask you to consider that this presentation of this use and occupancy is not equivalent to a kennel. And you saw some of the testimony, some of the exhibits, and the kennel that exists here for a number of years, 75 I heard, 100 years, is what would be referred to as a free roaming kennel. And again, another specific fact in this record is Christine's testimony and Ryan's testimony. And Ryan's testimony is that this is anything but a free roaming facility. It's a controlled facility. It's with state-of-the-art controls over the dogs and the noise and everything else. The provisions of your conditional use are not only in, Maureen mentioned 236B, but also in your section Roman numeral 22, and I had it right here, but I think it's 91, section 291. I think what you've heard tonight, and I'll make this a very brief legal argument. I know my client doesn't want me to go too deep into the legal, but I think you've heard the applicant is willing and will address compliance with other applicable requirements under ordinances within the township. Ron mentioned going before HARB for the exterior viewpoint of the proposed facility itself. Ryan Whitmore mentioned the issues of zoning relief that are what I'll just describe as secondary to the primary use approval that we ask that you grant this applicant. And some of that relief is dimensional in nature, and so we have a lesser burden in a sense there, but still compliant with those requirements. Still in all, the crux of this case, of this presentation is, this is not a kennel. And so the point of what are the applicable ordinance requirements that relate to this particular proposed use? And that's precisely why we're before you for a conditional use approval, because your ordinance doesn't really address this state-of-the-art pet care facility that's under complete control. And I would only underscore that it's a franchise. It's not a single owner operation. And I'll just make the point that the franchise, or represented by Kevin, has strict standards that it requires for the purpose of its goodwill and good name in its national operation. So I think you could be rest assured that this operation will be consistent with the franchise standards, which are enforced by the franchisor. And you also heard that for whatever reason, if Christine would step away from the operation, another franchisee subject to those same standards would be the only person or entity that would come in to operate this canine resort. So with that, I think we addressed the wording of the conditional use, which is the spirit, the intent, the history. We're trying to present a service to the community which we think is needed. With that, I thank you.
At this time, we'll open up to the board if they have any questions of the applicant and/or their witnesses.
Any members of the Board of Supervisors have any questions of anyone at this time? Hearing none.
Hearing none. I did have just one quick question. You mentioned the retail component of the operation. Can you just tell me just very briefly what that is, how this?
I'm sorry, I can't hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
The retail. Our plan or our goal with the retail is to keep it in the same nature as the canine resort. We're hoping to attract either other pet types of operations such as grooming, pet food, things along that nature. We think there's a need for that within the township, and we think that's what we're going to try to attract. But most everything we'd be looking to do would be service, either for a human service or for a pet service.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
And we would stay within the permitted uses within the zone.
Thank you.
We have public comment online, I believe, if you want to bring that in.
Yes, please.
Okay.
We have Chris in the room. Chris, go ahead and ask your question.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Hi, Chris.
Thank you.
Please
Hey,
state your name
hey.
and whether or not you're a resident.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Budens. Hey, I'll make this brief. I just wanted to say I believe a dog boarding place in Lower Makefield is very needed. I've used the facilities that is currently in Yardley, and I'm very dissatisfied with that. And right now, when we have to travel around an hour away to drop our dogs off to get boarded. And I think that a dog boarding facility in Lower Makefield would be frankly very, very good and convenient and a lot closer. So I'm all for it, and that's what I'm called to say. And it sounds like a good idea.
Thank you for your comments. Any more online? Yeah, I'll get through. Looks like a no. Anyone in the audience like to make public comment? Please come up to the podium. State your name and whether or not you're a resident.
Thank you very much. Appreciate being here, seeing all the decision that goes into these types of efforts. My name is Brad Burwald. I'm a resident over in Yardley. And what I'd just like to say is after experiencing dog ownership in the last many years, I also faced similar challenges regarding finding the ability to board the dog in basically a safe and efficient manner, and also a convenient one. I travel extensively for work, so find myself out of town. I've currently used the facility in Horsham, although it is quite far. It is definitely worth it in many ways, but because of the challenge of the distance, I would really like to see a facility come here. I think it's along the lines of what this type of community expects in terms of quality and the benefits and the way, that it's handled. Not to go off on a tangent, but I grew up in rural Ohio. I know what a kennel is. This is not a kennel. Very dramatically different, not unlike the lobby at the Holiday Inn Express that I go to later that day. I saw that morning as I dropped the dog off. So I would just want to advocate for this. My whole world is between Yardley and Newtown, where I work and where my wife works, and this would be a big change for us to have this this type of facility available. So, thank you very much.
Appreciate your comments. Any other comments in the audience tonight? I'm assuming no more online. Okay. With that, I believe that's all our public comment. Solicitor?
It is. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just would have one other quick question or ask for a furtherance of information from the applicant. In requesting a conditional use from the township, conditional use requires two of the criteria specifically state that such use shall be of the same general nature and character as were the uses in the original village. And number two, such use is in accord with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the historic commercial district. Can you just elaborate briefly as to how you believe you meet those criteria?
Well, the original village was a farm. You know, I actually remember as a youngster coming up, and the entire lower Makefield was a farm. There was really nothing around except Yardley Borough and farmland. And this particular corner was a kind of a center of attention because, number one, it had had a gas station there. You had some farm buildings there, and it was sort of a little bit of a village. If you kind of look back and you talk about what's what uses are permitted, you know, it'd be like a blacksmith, a tin mill. It's kind of a rural thing, and if we wanted to be compared to a kennel would be in a kind of a rural setting or kind of in a colonial setting where animals were taken care of. Again, we think because we're adjacent to the Patterson farm and all the open space, because we're heavily wooded, we believe this type of a use will blend in with the environment and not be a detriment or detract from anything that's going on in the area.
Okay, thank you. So at this point, is there any further evidence that you would like to enter into the record?
If I may.
Please.
In response to your question, I would just point out what was mentioned in the opening by Mr. Rusk. You have stated prohibited uses, and we're nothing near those prohibited uses. And again, the area, the proposed use is complementary to obviously the daycare by that letter, and also we're not inconsistent with the uses that are there now, and you heard the traffic engineer say that there is no great impact. There won't be any substantial impact with the traffic. And in addition to that, there'll be a PennDOT highway opening application, although there's the curb cuts there now for the daycare center. So we're not changing things that exist there now. So again, the point I'm making is we're consistent with the activity that goes on in this area of the township. And we believe I submit to you that's consistent with the spirit and intent of the historic commercial district. And it's actually commercial, historic, commercial. I'm not sure why, but that's what the district is, that's how it's defined. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, is there any objection to closing the record as to?
I'm sorry, may I just ask one additional question, just of the sound engineer? So Ben, just as you're sort of showing your graphic and you were comparing noise levels to ambient noise levels, I just want to make sure are you comparing a single dog bark to the ambient noise levels, and what happens to the extent that there are multiple dogs barking simultaneously at the same time? How does that impact that analysis? Or
sure. I was trying to hurry things along, so I guess overstep providing some info on there. So yes, while technically the levels that were presented and overlaid are in fact for just the single dog bark, but when you factor in a lot of the other things that were discussed during testimony, one, that dog barks are impulsive, short in duration, less than 1 second. Even if you were to have a situation where you would have 20 dogs all barking at the same time doesn't overlap in the same way as it would be if I turned on 2 air conditioning units. And so what happens then, because the dog barking is so impulsive, that other dogs barking just increases the duration of the occurrence of barking. So instead of when I was mimicking a dog bark, it would be bark, bark, bark. Having multiple dogs might make that bark, 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 which is just a closer knit of the same level. So in the situation that you could have 2 dogs bark at the same time such that they would overlap in level, there would be some sort of accumulation of sorts. But if you go back to the data and look at our factor of safety, as well as the other the degree of compliance and the comparison, that even if they were to overlap in some obscure manner that I don't foresee, it still wouldn't have a negative impact. I think what to be focused on here is that if dog barking starts to occur, that it's a prime directive of the staff to deal with that in a swift manner, and whether that's separating the dogs or adjusting the behavior. But what you could hear is an occasional bark here and there. It would not result in a cacophony or be markedly different than the results that we discussed tonight. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board at this time?
Okay, at this time, I'll ask again, any objection to closing the record as to additional evidence? None? Thank you. Thank you. We've already gone through our public comment, either for pro or con. So at this point, this matter is ripe for the board's consideration. As stated at the beginning of this hearing, the board has 45 days to prepare a written decision, and they will do so. We will mail that as required by the ordinance and by statute to Mr. Fenningham and to the applicant. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We'll give them a quick minute. Can I leave this with you?
Yes. Make sure that gets back to the sound. All right, Jim. Take care. Good luck.
All right.
Thanks.
Have a good night. Moving along to item 7B, consider issuance of a certificate of appropriateness for the existing and proposed buildings at 1674 Edgewood Road, otherwise known as The Point. Mr. Majewski.
Good evening. As you are all aware, the project at the corner of Edgewood Road and Yardley Langhorne Road has been under consideration for a number of years. The applicant has been to HARB, I believe, 7 or 8 meetings they had gone to. And as they went through the iterative process, they came down to where they finally got a recommendation for the Board of Supervisors to approve the certificate of appropriateness for the plans, with the stipulation that the porch roofs be metal roofs on the reconstruction restoration. As well, the trim on the windows be redefined and enlarged to be consistent throughout the project and be drawn up and presented to HARB with dimensions and details, and that there be a set of stairs on the point house. The applicant is willing to comply with all those comments, and they're already having their architect work on the plans to revise that. And ultimately, this would allow the the developer to renovate and restore the existing house at the corner, known as the Ishmael House, demolish and replicate the existing house called the Quill House. It's in very poor condition, but it will be replicated to look substantially like it does currently, only, in good shape. And then construct the 3 new buildings per the approved plans that were approved by the Board of Supervisors last year.
Anyone like to make a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So, Mr. Majewski, this process has been going on for quite some time. Correct me if I misspeak, but this appears to be the last in a long line of approvals to allow the project to move forward. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And Harb's has done a lot of work on this. I think several of us have been liaisons throughout the process with Harb. And they've offered many recommendations and guidance, et cetera. It sounds, I don't think anyone from Harb is here this evening, but it sounds like they've made some sort of I don't want to call it a conditional approval per se, but it sounds like they've said, let's issue this COA, but let's make sure these last few items are covered. And it sounds like the developer has agreed to that. Is that a fair statement?
That is correct.
All right. So any questions or comments from board members?
Yeah, Jim, I just want to confirm, I know we've talked about it, but that somewhere in all those documents that have been here and before Harb and Historical, we have in fact included what Historical asked for, which is save that old building first. Do not go anywhere else until the building that's being salvaged is repaired, and that's step 1, right? Nothing else until that.
Correct. The land development agreement requires that they first obtain building permits for the existing house and the house to be replicated prior to getting any permits for any of the other buildings, and that no occupancy certificates be issued for any building until they get the one for the one to be renovated and the other to be replicated.
Thank you for stating that so much more eloquently than myself.
Building on that, are there, if they don't do that, what happens? If they start to move forward without following that order?
Well, it's, Maureen could handle that one.
No permits will be issued, no. Stop and desist orders. There are a number of things that can occur and will occur if that's the path they choose.
And the reason I ask, I know there's some history in the township of other agreements being made that may not have been followed through with, going back years. And I know there's concern always when there's a historic building there. So I just want to make sure that we have recourse and that we can enforce all the provisions of the land development agreement.
I would just say I think it's incumbent upon both the developer and the township for us to keep an eye on it and for them to abide by the development agreement that they will enter into.
Agreed. Get that on the record. Any other comments or concerns from anyone at the table here? All right. Anyone in the audience want to say anything? Ask any questions? And it doesn't appear that we have anyone online. All right, so we have a motion and a second. I don't hear any other comments, so I'll call it to question. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thanks, Jim. Item 8, engineer's report. It was in your packet. Everything seemed fairly straightforward. Does anyone have any questions or comment on the engineer's report? All right. We can leave him be for now. Mr. Kratzer, item 9 is the manager's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Before you is Resolution 25-02. It's a resolution of the Lower Makefield Township Board of Supervisors establishing and changing the compensation for the Lower Makefield Township tax collector. This change would be effective in the next term of the tax collector, or the municipal tax collector. The local tax collection law requires action on this matter prior to February 15th of the year of a municipal election. So we've received this request from the current tax collector. Again, remains to be seen what happens through the election process. We did compare the proposed compensation to that of peers throughout Bucks County, and would recommend approval of the resolution. The compensation figures are consistent with market.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve Resolution 25-02, establishing and changing the Lower Makefield Township tax collector's compensation for the term beginning January 1st, 2026.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions from board members?
Just real quick, what's the existing versus the proposed?
So the structure is a little bit different, but in terms of regular, the existing is 285 by resolution. Again, that was adopted some time ago. I believe it was not this last election cycle, but perhaps the election cycle prior to that. And despite there was seemingly some sort of confusion at that time, the resolution actually established at 285. The action that was taken by the Board of Supervisors in terms of the minutes reflected 215. So despite the resolution passed authorizing a higher level of compensation, the current tax collector just simply was charging the 215.
Got you. So we're going to the 285 that we had agreed to?
This is proposing $4 for a regular and interim tax bill issued.
Okay.
And again, that is consistent or even in some cases below the compensation paid to other tax collectors in Bucks County.
And just in addition to compensation, we want to make sure that we're maintaining office space, access to internet, et cetera.
That is correct. The provision of office space is referenced also in the resolution, noting that the township shall continue to provide the tax collector at no additional cost to the tax collector with the office space at the municipal building as utilized at the time of the adoption, and that such office space shall include applicable utilities, telephone service, and internet service. So that is also being provided.
I was just going to say, is that also consistent with competing municipalities?
That is, in some cases, their compensation is higher, and then they're charging rent.
Charging it back.
It's being netted.
Not the same, okay. Thanks.
One additional question, and I don't think this is the reason why I made the motion, is can we make sure that the tax collector gets a restoration of a township-based email address to ensure that people receiving email from the township collector can verify that it's actually coming from the tax collector?
We can absolutely look into that, yes. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Anyone in the audience? Don't see anyone online. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none.
Thank you very much.
That's all, Mr. Kratzer?
That is all, unless the board has any questions.
All right. Item number 10, we have 3 items for Park and Rec. Come on, yeah. Table is set.
Good evening. It's past my bedtime. So today I have for you, If It's Water proposal for CoStars to replace the filter for the intermediate pool in the amount of $84,017.46. This is part of a 3-year program to replace all the filters at the pool. This filter is from 1981. We've doubled its useful life. It's about 20 years for a filter. Looking to replace that this year, and we budgeted it in the fee and lieu fund.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any comments or questions from board members? All right. Well, I have one, sort of a general comment or question, I guess. As we, we have different things, a couple different items in the pool here today, and we're paying for them from different, one is fee in lieu, one's the pool fund. You mentioned it in your intros that this is a multi-year program that we've been implementing. I think the goal, and we've all been hearing this the last year or two, the goal of the board, I think, when it comes to the pool and the golf course and other things where there's specific funds, is to make them self-sustainable. So we'd like to understand, maybe not tonight necessarily, but a long-term plan for operations and maintenance, budgeting, et cetera, such that we can take that, push that into the pool fund, rather than having to dip into fee and lieu, park and rec fee and lieu, so that we can use those park and rec fee and lieu dollars for other park and rec resources that we always talk about trying to fix up as best we can. So any way we can look to make the pool, lack of a better description, and the fee and lieu and the park and rec fund, I'll call it, operating fund, as you mentioned here for the later item. Looking to see, hopefully this is the last year we have to use fee and lieu for the pool is what I'm getting at.
Yes, we have a lot of our larger projects done after this year. But I plan to work with Mega as she gets herself settled and with the park board to develop a plan. We've talked about this historically, so definitely agree with that. I'd love to see that too. Yep.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any public comment? I don't see any online. So with that, I have a motion and a second, so I'll call it the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Next item.
And before you have the proposal from EAW Security, it's also a CoStar's contract to replace the camera system at the pool. The camera system is pretty antiquated, hard to see now, and it's a mixture of, some very old equipment with some mediocrely old equipment, and it's on two different systems. So the idea is to modernize, bring things up to current standards, and also fill in some of the gaps. So this summer in particular, we had a couple incidents, both of them not visible on the camera. So the system will help us see things a little bit better than we have in the past. The police department will have access, just like they do have access to our current cameras. And with time, I'm hoping that we can switch all of our cameras to this same, more modern one-stop shop security system. Our neighbors use them too. Middletown Township is the one who gave me the recommendation. They love them. So I was very impressed with their presentation. So I'm here before you. If you have any questions, just let me know.
So moved.
Second. There we go.
I think you beat me.
Yeah, I like it. Sounds like the plan, we have cameras in other park and rec areas, right? In other parks, and that would be ultimately the plan, to get everyone on the same system.
Sure.
As we go. Question for our township manager, I think. With the new, what we're looking at for IT changes, generally speaking, I want to make sure this integrates well, and that anything new from an IT perspective, that it will maintain.
Yeah, we have no concern with integration, no.
Good.
And this downloads the videos to the cloud where we can access it, or do we have to have on-site storage for video?
There'll be on-site storage, and I believe cloud storage too, both.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right.
Expensive ring.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a nice.
Just real quick, let the record reflect that it's CoStars, not CoStats.
That is correct.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. No more comments. I'll call it the question. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. 2 for 2. What's up next?
The next one I have before you is turf management, being the turf grass that we have at our athletic fields. We're kind of changing gears, and especially after last year with the drought, we're changing the way we maintain the fields. We're using a turf-specific vendor. This is for treatments throughout the year. Likely we'll be back for some of the remediation that we need after the drought and some of the some of the repairs we need to some of the fields as a whole, just to make them safe. So I'll probably be back later. We did budget for this, and we budgeted $120,000 total for the year for field maintenance. So it's well within the budget, and this will be 4 treatments. And just to talk about this a little further, I've been partnering with the leagues a little more carefully now, so they'll be also working through the same vendor, and so we'll have a better system between all of us together, and they're contributing too. So just wanted to add that in there.
Related to that, so this $26K contract would be for us to pay for 4 treatments or 4 applications, whatever. What does the league do? The league's gonna be using the same vendor. Does that mean they're gonna pay for, oversimple? Does that mean they're gonna pay for, let's say, another 4 treatments at other times of the year? What do they do relative to this?
So they, if they see a big project that's outside of general maintenance, or if there's something outside of safety that they are requesting, that's reasonable. We'll work with the vendor and we'll partner, and they pay for instance, YMS wanted field repair in December in hopes to get the field ready for the spring. So they I think their project was $7,000, a field maintenance to repair 1 field. So they contributed and paid for that directly.
So that's in addition to this?
That's in addition to what we already did, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's obviously you know this, but it's just, if they're gonna be wanting to do their own thing, and we're already have something planned, we wanna make sure they don't.
They mesh, yeah.
Gonna do the same thing.
Yes.
Doing that.
Yes.
All right. Did we get a motion on that one yet?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Oh, we haven't?
I don't think you did, no.
So moved.
Second?
All right. Any comments or questions from board members?
No.
Anyone in the audience? No one online? That called the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. 3 for 3.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 11, Public Works. Where's Mr. Fuller?
That was the lucky chair.
That was the lucky chair.
Okay. Okay. Just want to talk about dog barks a little bit longer, if we can talk about that a little bit more.
How loud are they?
Well, if you put 2 dogs together, if they can't bark at the same time.
Not a concern.
So,
It can pounce, yeah, absolutely.
good evening. Before the board tonight, we have a consideration of approval from RVE's proposal for supplement design services related to the Woodside Road and Taylorsville Road crossing project at an additional cost of $15,250. If the board so wishes, I don't know if Isaac can come up. Staff did review this proposal. I'm not sure if the board remembers, but this project design services was an RFP. The township at the time received 3 proposals, chose Remington and Vernick's proposal. Everything included within this work change or change order, I guess, request is all additional work that was outside the original scope of services. And most of it is relating to the deletion of guide rail to allow the crossing to take place. Once RV kind of investigated further and dove in with PennDOT, they determined it requires a head wall extension. That's what that guide rail was protecting. So that will require a lot of permitting, things, GP4, I think it is, and some other coordination with PennDOT to get that head wall extended within the right-of-way and allow the crossing design to continue. There are a couple things after staff did review this proposal. And Isaac, I don't know if you mind coming up. Just a couple confirmations that we wanted to make sure are in place after reading the scope.
He's coming up.
He's getting the lucky chair.
So, hi, Isaac. Hi. Talk about dogs. So, just a few things. We did want to confirm, Isaac, that the additional scope of work is also to be included with the not-to-exceed amount of the original contract value with RVE. The other item was that the amendment is inclusive for all known necessary scope modifications, i.e. this is basically for the head wall extension work, that there's no other permitting that's going to have to take place for that. You have all that in this scope price. And with deliverables, we will have a full permanent head wall extension. There's no other meeting costs or anything like that for DEP or anything kind of coordination costs you don't think would have to take place, to the best of your knowledge at this point. And there's no additional survey work, and there's no additional increase for any of the CM, construction management, construction observation for this additional work, to the best of your knowledge, I guess, at this point.
Yes, this supplement is for the Phase 2, the design phase, and it's for that design work that would be the extending of the head wall. And the reason for that is to have it be outside the clear zone, which allows the guide rail to be removed to the point where we can have the trail aligned the way that PennDOT prefers. The survey was done up until the right-of-way line around the intersection, and this work will still have the project stay within the public right-of-way. So there is a GP4 that's associated with extending that discharge point, and we see that as a fairly straightforward permit with the DEP, as the flow is not changing at all. It's just the physical location of that head wall. Did I answer all the questions?
Yeah,
listed there?
I believe that's good, yeah.
Very good.
Thank you. So like I said, it would be staff's recommendation to approve this change order request for RV.
Happy to answer any other questions the board may have.
Comments, questions from board members?
No, I don't think we have a motion, so.
That's, yeah. Hey, you want to make a
So
motion?
moved?
Second.
All right, I'll ask again then, since officially. Any comments or questions from board members on the motion? Any public comment? Oh. Reminder, please state your name and whether or not.
Yeah, Lori Gray, I am a Lower Makefield Township resident. I'm sorry, where is this? This is an additional cost that's not budgeted, or it's budgeted, and where is it coming from?
Derek, do you want to?
If I recall, the original project, the project as a whole was budgeted. So I believe, I can't remember, David, where the whole construction of the project crossing is budgeted. I don't remember what fund for $100 some. So this is still within the budgeted allocation. Again, it maybe decrease some of the construction cost from the project, but overall, we're still within the budgeted amount for the crossing.
Okay, great.
No.
That's really kind of what my question was.
Yeah,
Thank you.
until we have construction, we wouldn't know if we're over or under budget. Well, the engineering is part of that.
Okay.
The whole budgeted amount of, again, I think it was $100 some.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yep.
Ms. Gray, just to add one little caveat, the reason for the change order is that the original design, after conversations with PennDOT, they've asked for some changes to the design. I believe the original design had a refuge island.
Yeah, refuge island and a slight different angle that would make more sense. Is the standard would be to angle it a little different. PennDOT came back and wanted it altered the location. So in order to alter it, we have to remove all this guide rail. In order to remove the guide rail, we have to push this head wall back that it was protecting.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Just as a reminder of the location of the project, it's the trail that comes at Woodside right now and the trail that's on the Joint Toll Bridge Commission property. This is connecting those two to have a continuous connection for folks in this area, and then that connect to the network that goes into New Jersey. Did want to point out just two things that we are able to benefit by with the work that we have coordinated with PennDOT, or really their direction. So one is with that alternate with the refuge island that they gave us direction that they actually do not want. That's related to the timing of the full crossing for folks that are getting across the intersection there. We're able to incorporate really a cost-saving approach of the design in the final layout while maintaining the existing signal equipment. That's one of the reasons with the guide rail gone that you're able to go around the existing mast arm and things that are there, which are expensive things to move. The other thing to point out is with the head wall extension, the water that comes out of that head wall now has some issues. The property owner that's just outside the right-of-way there has voiced concerns about the way that water comes out. One of the things we can do with shifting that head wall is really modify the way that the water is able to dissipate coming out of that, and that really be an added benefit without really any added cost to the project that can address an issue that a resident has there in the project area. So not all bad things from the direction that we got from PennDOT to modify that area.
All right. So I have a motion and a second, and we have all of our comments. Call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Abstained.
Abstain, okay. Let the record show, motion carries 4-0 to 1.
Thank you.
Item 12, Solicitor's Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes shall reflect that the supervisors present this evening met in executive session immediately prior to this Board of Supervisors meeting to discuss an employment matter and litigation matters. And my report is short. I think you've heard me speak enough tonight. We just received comments this week from Bucks County Planning Commission to our proposed historic demolition ordinance. We've reviewed them briefly. We'll review them in more depth, and we'll make the necessary changes, modifications, et cetera, to the ordinance, and that will be back before you. Their comments to the ordinance, some of them were very innocuous, changes here and there for numbering systems, et cetera. Some a little bit more substantive, but again, we'll delve into those a little bit more deeply, and they'll be up for discussion next time. Hopefully next meeting it will be before you. And that's really it for me this evening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Supervisor reports, we are moving. All right, on my end, Planning Commission has not met since last meeting. Stormwater Management Committee, I believe we just received some updates based on our last meeting, so we'll be scheduling a updated Stormwater Management Committee meeting to review the ordinance fairly soon, so hopefully we'll have something on an agenda in the next month or so. Roger Lewis?
Sure. Two quick things. First, the EAC will be meeting on February 13th, and I'll be there for that. And then on February 18th, the HRC, or Human Relations Commission, will be having its first meeting. Will actually be a meeting with the state to get some training as part of that startup process. And before I pass the baton, just a final note. Anna Payne was a very special person, so it's difficult to, when that Caringbridge email came through. She's a wonderful person, and hopefully when you take away and think about some of the stuff that we do here that seems pretty perfunctory and stuff, it's important to remember that she served our community well, and she always had a sunny disposition despite so many challenges, and so it's a learning for all of us, and I miss her.
Supervisor Ross?
No report.
Supervisor McCartney?
No report.
Lundy?
Yeah, well, I'm going to pretend it's 2024 and say shout out to Historical, who found 2 gravestones within the wall, the crumbling wall of the Slate Hill Cemetery. Will be reunited to the proper place and now back into the future. Trenton Airport was unable to meet this week, but last week, but they did want, the community to be aware that there is, in fact, some construction going on over there, and they are asking for an opportunity to present their concerns to a wider audience. So that's all I've got.
Duly noted. Thank you. All right. Item 14, other business. I don't know if we have any to discuss this evening. All right.
No additional items.
Item 15, I don't know that we have any appointments or reappointments to boards and committees. I will take this opportunity to say, if you are interested in volunteering for a board or committee, we do have several openings at the moment. Please check the township website. I believe township will be putting
We will be, yes.
information out on social media so you can see exactly where we have openings. But we appreciate any and all support you can give us for these volunteer boards and committees. All right. This is your second bite at the apple for item number 16, additional public comment on non-agenda items if needed.
We're going to rename it Lori's Comments.
What, yes. And I know you know this, but please state your name and whether or not you're a resident.
It's Lori Gray, and I am a Lower Makefield Township resident. It's just one question. Typically, the engineer's report, he typically gives the report during the meeting, right? But this time, you guys have it in your packet, but what's in it? Like,
So-
do we,
so-
do we get to see what's in
We
it? I
we
mean-
always have the engineer's report in our packet. That's nothing new.
Right, but doesn't, I mean, he usually is up there and he speaks to things, right? Like,
Only if we have questions. There's no need to
Oh.
have the engineer just rattle off updates on 30 projects. We'll be talking about traffic and dog barking for another 3 hours.
no. I know, but typically he's reported, right, on things, hasn't he, typically at the
Well,
end
and
of
that's why
meetings?
if any supervisors have questions
Okay.
about the engineer's report,
Okay.
then that's why I turned to everyone and said, if you have any questions,
Okay.
the engineer, that's why the engineer's here.
Right.
And if there are any questions, we'll call him up to the dais here and we'll fire away.
Okay.
Similar to the specific item, the change order that the Public Works Director put forward.
Okay.
That's why, again, that's why the engineer's here to answer questions on that type of item.
Great, thank you. So maybe I should have asked this since a year and a half I've been coming. Where is the engineer's report? Like, does the public get to see that? Is that on the website, or is there no need for us to see it, or?
It's basically, I don't know that we've ever published packets before. Some townships do.
Yeah, we have
but
not, but-
it's nothing, it's really just an update on projects that they're reviewing that
Right.
they might not be township projects. It might be some developers going through a process.
Okay.
They're providing reviews and updates on various plans. So they'll give us a quick heads up on that. Mr. Majewski has done that in the past on certain things that he's reviewing as well. It may be other projects that the township is doing that the engineer is either designing or reviewing as well. And it's just a way to keep us informed in terms of where they're at, and then we can ask questions. And normally, I'm the type of guy to ask questions on the engineers.
I know, so it's, I learn a lot.
Yeah,
so
there just hasn't been anything
Okay.
of late that, we have big questions on.
Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to figure it all out, so I appreciate that. You're educating me, and I appreciate that, so thank you.
Keep the questions coming, we appreciate it. All right. So that public comment is over.
I was just going to mention, if, as the township engineer, if any residents have questions, you can always reach out for any information you might be curious about.
Yeah. Well, I would never go directly to the engineer. Always go through the township staff, please. With that, item 17, adjournment. Have a good night.